The thunderous sound of hooves pounding against the dusty earth broke through the still morning air as Emma Baker raced toward her isolated homestead, heart hammering against her ribs. The year was 1875, and the territory of Wyoming was as beautiful as it was dangerous. The smoke rising in the distance could only mean one thing: trouble had found her home while she'd been away. Faster, she whispered to her chestnut mare, leaning forward as the animal stretched its legs across the prairie. Emma's thoughts raced faster than her horse, fixed on her two children left with only their elderly neighbor as protection. 10-year-old Sarah and 7-year-old James were all she had left in this world since her husband Thomas had passed 3 winters ago from pneumonia. The small ranch house came into view as she crested the hill, and Emma's blood ran cold. 3 horses were hitched outside, horses she didn't recognize. The smoke wasn't from a fire, as she'd feared, but from her own chimney. Someone had made themselves at home. Emma dismounted before her mare had fully stopped, her calico skirt swirling around her ankles as she reached for the small revolver hidden in her saddlebag. At 32, Emma had learned the hard way that a woman alone needed to be her own protector in these lands. But her children? Where were her children? A scream from inside the house made her decision for her. Emma rushed forward, forsaking caution for speed. She burst through the door to find a scene that would haunt her for years to come. Mrs. Holloway, her 70-year-old neighbor, lay unconscious in the corner. 3 rough-looking men had taken over her home. The largest one, with a thick beard and a scar crossing his left cheek, held James by the collar while Sarah cowered behind the kitchen table. "Let him go," Emma said, raising the revolver with trembling hands. "Take whatever you want and leave my children be." The scarred man turned, his surprise quickly melting into a cruel smile. "Well, well, the mother returns. Boys, looks like we got ourselves a fighter." "Mama!" James cried out, struggling against his captor's grip. The second outlaw, younger but with equally cruel eyes, approached Emma. "Put the gun down, lady. You ain't got enough bullets for all of us, and even if you did, you'd never get all 3 before one of us got to your kids." Emma felt the world closing in around her. The outlaw was right. She couldn't risk her children's lives. Slowly, she lowered the gun. "That's better," said the third man, the quietest of the bunch. "Now, we're just passing through, looking for some supplies and maybe a place to lay low for a few days. The law's been on our tail since the bank job in Cheyenne." "You can't stay here," Emma protested, though she knew her words meant nothing to these men. The scarred man laughed. "I don't think you're in a position to tell us what we can and can't do, madam." Just then, the sound of an approaching horse drew everyone's attention. The outlaws tensed, and the scarred one dragged James toward the window to peek outside. "Rider coming!" he hissed to his companions. "Just one." Emma's heart leapt with a desperate hope. Perhaps it was someone from town, someone who could help. But out here, so far from civilization, visitors were rare. The sound of boots on the porch made the outlaws draw their weapons. The door swung open, and a tall figure filled the frame, silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun. "Afternoon," came a deep voice, calm and measured despite the tense tableau before him. "Seems I've interrupted something." As the stranger stepped inside, Emma could finally see him clearly. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes as blue as the Wyoming sky. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but the star pinned to his leather vest gleamed in the dim light of the cabin. "Name's Gabriel Turner," he said, his gaze sweeping over the scene before settling on Emma. "Deputy U.S. Marshal, and you boys are in a heap of trouble." The scarred outlaw tightened his grip on James. "Back off, lawman. We got the woman and her kids. You take one more step, and the boy gets hurt." Gabriel didn't flinch. His expression remained impassive, but Emma caught a flicker of calculation in those blue eyes. "Now, that's not how this has to go. I'm guessing you're the Rollins gang. Bank job in Cheyenne. Stagecoach robbery near Laramie. The outlaws exchanged nervous glances, confirming Gabriel's suspicions. Recognized your description, Gabriel continued, still not moving from his position by the door. 3 men, one with a scar like a railroad track across his cheek. That'd be you, I reckon. He nodded toward the leader. Harlan Rollins, wanted in 3 territories. Harlan's face darkened. Knowing my name won't save you, Marshal. Gabriel shrugged, seeming almost casual despite the gravity of the situation. Maybe not. But it might interest you to know that I'm not alone. Got a posse half a mile back. They're giving me time to negotiate, but if they don't hear from me soon, they'll come in shooting. Emma could tell he was bluffing. There had been only one horse approaching, but his confident delivery made even her momentarily doubt her own ears. Harlan hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty, Gabriel's hand moved faster than Emma could follow. His revolver cleared its holster and fired in one fluid motion. The shot struck Harlan's shoulder, causing him to release James with a howl of pain. "Run!" Gabriel shouted to the boy, who bolted toward his mother. What followed was chaos. The second outlaw fired, the bullet splintering the doorframe beside Gabriel's head. The marshal dove to the side, returning fire as he rolled behind the heavy oak table that Emma had overturned for cover. Sarah screamed as Emma pulled both children to the floor, shielding them with her body. The third outlaw made a break for the back door, but Gabriel's aim was true. The man fell with a cry, clutching his leg. The second outlaw, seeing his companions down, threw his gun aside. "Don't shoot! I surrender!" Gabriel rose slowly, keeping his weapon trained on the remaining threats. "Face down on the floor, hands behind your back." As the outlaw complied, Emma finally dared to breathe. She looked at her children, checking them for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did they harm you?" "We're okay, Mama," Sarah whispered, though her face was pale with fear. James nodded, his small body trembling against hers. Gabriel moved quickly, binding the outlaws with rope from Emma's own supplies. Harlan glared murderously at the marshal as his wound was roughly bandaged. "You're a dead man, Turner. My brother will hunt you down for this." Gabriel didn't respond to the threat, instead turning his attention to Mrs. Holloway, who was beginning to stir in the corner. "Madam, are you all right?" The elderly woman groaned, touching a bruise forming on her temple. "They came so suddenly, tried to protect the children." "You did well," Emma assured her, helping Mrs. Holloway to a chair. "Thank you for trying." With the immediate danger contained, Emma finally had a moment to properly look at their savior. Gabriel Turner was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps mid-30s, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent in the saddle under the harsh western sun. His light brown hair was in need of a trim, and several days' worth of stubble darkened his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught and held her attention, clear blue and direct, with a depth of experience that seemed at odds with his relatively young age. "Thank you," Emma said simply, the words inadequate for what he'd done. "You saved my children." Gabriel nodded, holstering his weapon. "Just doing my job, madam. These men have been terrorizing folks across the territory for months, been tracking them since they hit that bank in Cheyenne." "There's no posse, is there?" Emma asked quietly, so the children wouldn't hear. A small smile touched Gabriel's lips. "No, madam, just me. But they didn't need to know that. That was a terrible risk you took. Sometimes the only play is a risky one." He glanced at James and Sarah, who were watching him with wide-eyed wonder. "Couldn't let anything happen to these little ones?" The moment was interrupted by a groan from the wounded outlaw. Gabriel turned, his expression hardening once more. "Need to get these men to the nearest jail. White Ridge is closest, I believe?" "Yes, about 15 miles west," Emma confirmed. "But you can't transport 3 prisoners alone, especially with one wounded." Gabriel considered this. "You're right. I'll need to get word to the sheriff in White Ridge." He glanced out the window at the setting sun. "Too late to start tonight, though. Emma made a quick decision. You can stay here. We have a small barn where you can secure the prisoners for the night. Gabriel hesitated. Don't want to impose, madam. You and your children have been through enough today. We'd feel safer with you here, Emma admitted. And please, call me Emma. Emma Baker. Emma? He repeated, and something in the way he said her name made her heart flutter unexpectedly. If you're certain, I accept your offer. These men won't cause any more trouble tonight, I promise you that. With Mrs. Holloway resting in Emma's bed and the children finally asleep in their small room after the day's excitement, Emma joined Gabriel on the porch. He'd secured the outlaws in her barn, binding their wounds and their hands with equal efficiency. The night was clear, with a blanket of stars stretching endlessly above the prairie. Emma wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the cooling air, watching as Gabriel cleaned his revolver by the light of the oil lamp. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Gabriel's hands continued their methodical work. Army. Served under General Crook during the last Indian campaigns. After that, took up the badge. Seemed like a way to keep using what I learned for something worthwhile. Emma nodded. My husband wanted to join up, but his lungs were never strong enough. He passed 3 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss, Gabriel said, and the simple sincerity in his voice touched her. It's been hard, Emma admitted, running this place alone, raising 2 children. But we manage. Gabriel reassembled his weapon with practiced ease. You're doing a fine job. Those are good children. Thank you. Emma hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. Those men, will they hang? Gabriel's expression grew somber. Likely. They've killed during their robberies. The law doesn't look kindly on that, especially not Judge Parker down in Fort Smith. Emma shivered, not from the cold, but from the thought of what might have happened had Gabriel not arrived when he did. Tomorrow I'll ride to White Ridge, bring back the sheriff and some deputies, Gabriel continued. But I don't like leaving you and the children alone with those men in your barn, even secured as they are. We'll be fine, Emma assured him, though the idea of being alone with the outlaws, even restrained, made her uneasy. Gabriel seemed to read her thoughts. I'll leave at first light, ride hard, should be back by mid-afternoon at the latest. Emma nodded, grateful for his understanding. I'll have breakfast ready before you go. They fell silent again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Emma found herself studying Gabriel's profile in the lamplight, noting the straight line of his nose, the firm set of his jaw. There was something comforting about his presence, a steadiness that she hadn't realized how much she'd missed since Thomas died. How long have you been a marshal? She asked. 5 years now. Before that, I was a sheriff over in Montana Territory for a spell. And before the army? A small smile touched his lips. Curious, aren't you? Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm sorry. It's not my place to pry. No need to apologize, Gabriel assured her. It's nice to talk to someone who isn't a criminal or another lawman. He leaned back in his chair. Grew up on a ranch in Colorado. My pa raised horses, taught me to ride almost before I could walk. Left home at 17, worked cattle drives for a few years before the war came. Do you ever get back to Colorado? See your family? A shadow passed over Gabriel's features. Pa passed while I was in the army. Ma followed a year later. No siblings. No family left to speak of. Emma felt a pang of sympathy. I'm sorry. Gabriel shrugged. It's the way of things. What about you? How'd you end up out here, so far from anywhere? Emma smiled wistfully. Thomas had dreams. Wanted his own land, his own cattle. We came out here 8 years ago, when Sarah was just 2. James was born right there in that house. She nodded toward the cabin. Thomas built it with his own hands. He chose a beautiful piece of land, Gabriel observed, looking out at the moonlit prairie stretching away toward the distant mountains. Yes, he did. Emma sighed. Sometimes I think about selling, moving to town. It would be easier. The children could go to a proper school, not just my teaching. What's stopping you? Emma considered the question. It was his dream. Our dream. Giving up feels like I'd be betraying that. Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Dreams are important. Worth fighting for. Yes, Emma agreed softly. They are. The lamp flickered, its oil running low, and Emma realized how late it had grown. I should check on the children, then get some rest. Gabriel stood, towering over her in the darkness. Thank you for your hospitality, Emma. Not many would welcome a lawman and his prisoners, especially after what you've been through today. Thank you for saving my family, she replied. We owe you everything. Their eyes met and held for a long moment. Emma felt something stir within her, something she thought had died with Thomas. Flustered by the unexpected feeling, she looked away. Good night, Gabriel. Good night, Emma. His voice was gentle in the darkness. Sleep well. You and your children are safe tonight. As Emma lay in her makeshift bed on the floor beside Mrs. Holloway, she found her thoughts returning to the Marshal. There was something about Gabriel Turner that spoke to her, awakened feelings she'd thought long buried. But she was a practical woman. He was a lawman passing through, doing his job. Tomorrow he would take the outlaws away, and that would be the end of it. Still, as sleep finally claimed her, Emma's dreams were filled with blue eyes and a deep, reassuring voice that made her feel safe for the first time in years. True to his word, Gabriel departed at dawn, riding hard for White Ridge. Emma watched him go, standing in the doorway with her shotgun cradled in her arms. The children waved until his figure disappeared over the distant ridge. Is he coming back, Mama? James asked, his small hand still raised in farewell. Yes, sweetheart, he's gone to fetch the sheriff to take those bad men away. I like him, Sarah declared. He's brave, like in the stories you read us. Emma smiled, ruffling her daughter's blonde hair. Yes, he is. Now come inside. We have chores to do while we wait. The morning passed slowly. Emma kept the children close to the house, away from the barn where the outlaws were secured. She checked on the prisoners once, keeping her shotgun ready as she pushed water and some bread through the door, careful not to get too close. You won't get away with this, Harlan Rollins growled from the shadows. My brother Eli has a gang twice the size of ours. When he finds out what happened, he'll come for that marshal. And for you, and your brats. Emma refused to show fear. Drink your water and be quiet. The sheriff will be here soon enough. She closed the barn door firmly, sliding the heavy wooden bar into place. The outlaw's threat echoed in her mind as she returned to the house. What if there really was another gang? What if they came looking for revenge? Emma tried to push these worries aside as she focused on normal tasks, preparing lunch, tending to Mrs. Holloway's bruises, and helping the children with their lessons. But her eyes kept drifting to the window, watching the trail for any sign of Gabriel's return. It was mid-afternoon when she heard it, the sound of horses approaching. Emma's heart leapt with relief. She hurried to the door, expecting to see Gabriel returning with the sheriff and his men. Instead, what she saw made her blood run cold. 6 riders were approaching, and Gabriel wasn't among them. These men were rough-looking, heavily armed, and the one in the lead bore a striking resemblance to Harlan Rollins. Children, inside. Now, Emma commanded, her voice tight with fear. Sarah, take James to the cellar and stay there. Do not come out until I call for you. But Mama, Sarah began to protest. Now, Sarah, do as I say. Emma rarely raised her voice to her children, and the urgency in her tone brooked no argument. Sarah grabbed her brother's hand and pulled him toward the trapdoor in the kitchen floor that led to the small root cellar. Once the children were safely hidden, Emma turned to Mrs. Holloway, who had risen shakily from her chair. "Can you load a rifle?" The elderly woman nodded. "My Herbert was a hunter. Taught me how." Emma pressed her late husband's Winchester into Mrs. Holloway's hands. "Take position by the back window. If anyone tries to come in that way, fire a warning shot." With Mrs. Holloway stationed at the rear of the house, Emma took up position at the front window, shotgun ready. The riders had stopped about 50 yards from the house, conferring among themselves. The leader, who had to be Eli Rollins, gestured toward the barn. Emma's mind raced. If they freed Harlan and the others, she and the children would be at their mercy. She had to stall until Gabriel returned with help. The decision was made for her when Eli Rollins and 2 of his men started toward the house while the others moved toward the barn. Emma took a deep breath, then stepped onto the porch, shotgun raised. "That's far enough," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Eli Rollins halted, a cold smile spreading across his face. Unlike his brother, he had no distinctive scar, but the family resemblance was unmistakable. The same hard eyes, the same cruel set to his mouth. "Well, well, you must be the widow lady my brother mentioned in his message." Eli's hand rested casually on the revolver at his hip. "Where is he?" "In the barn with the rest of his gang. They're prisoners, and they'll stay that way until the law arrives." Eli laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "The only law around here is me, lady. Now, I'm going to give you one chance to put down that scatter gun and unlock that barn. Otherwise, things are going to get mighty unpleasant for you and whoever else is in that house." Emma didn't lower her weapon. "The marshal will be back any minute with the sheriff and his deputies. If you free those men, you'll all hang together." "The marshal?" Eli exchanged glances with his companions. "You mean that fellow we passed on the trail about 5 miles back? Tall fella, riding a bay horse?" A chill ran through Emma. "What have you done to him?" Eli's smile widened. "Let's just say he won't be bringing any help. Now, you going to open that barn, or do my boys need to come in there and convince you?" Emma's finger tightened on the trigger. She could take down Eli, maybe one other before they got to her. But then, what would happen to her children? To Mrs. Holloway? "I need time to think," she said, playing for time. "Give me 1 hour." Eli shook his head. "You've got 5 minutes, then we're coming in." He turned to rejoin his men, who had gathered near the barn. Emma retreated into the house, her mind working frantically. 5 minutes. What could she do in 5 minutes? "What's happening?" Mrs. Holloway asked from her position by the back window. "It's Harlan Rollins' brother and his gang. They're going to try to free the prisoners." Emma checked her ammunition. "And they've done something to Marshal Turner." Mrs. Holloway's aged face paled. "Lord help us." Emma looked around the small cabin that had been her home for 8 years. Thomas had built it sturdy, with thick logs and small windows that could be easily defended. But against 6 determined men with guns, how long could they hold out? Her eyes fell on the trapdoor to the cellar, where her children were hiding. She would die before letting those men harm Sarah and James. But dying wouldn't protect them. She needed to live, to find a way out of this impossible situation. An idea began to form. It was desperate, risky, but it might work. It had to work. "Mrs. Holloway, I need you to stay here with the children. Keep the rifle and stay hidden. If you hear shooting, take the children out through the cellar's outer door. Head for the creek bed and follow it east toward White Ridge." The older woman's eyes widened. "What are you going to do?" Emma checked the chambers of her husband's revolver, then tucked it into the pocket of her skirt. "Something foolish, probably, but I don't see another choice." Before Mrs. Holloway could protest, Emma slipped out the back door. She circled around the house, staying low and using the chicken coop and woodpile for cover. From this angle, she could see the outlaws gathered near the barn. They hadn't noticed her yet. their attention focused on the house, waiting for her answer to their ultimatum. Emma crept toward the corral where their horses were loosely tethered. If she could scatter them, it might create enough confusion for her to gain the advantage. She was almost there when a twig snapped beneath her boot. One of the outlaws turned at the sound. "Hey! Over there!" Emma abandoned stealth for speed. She dashed to the corral and slapped the nearest horse hard on its rump. The animal neighed in alarm, surging forward and causing a chain reaction among the other mounts. Within seconds, the horses were pulling free of their ties and bolting in all directions. "The horses! Get the horses!" one of the men shouted as the gang split up, some running after their fleeing mounts. Emma used the distraction to dash toward the barn. If she could reach it before they realized what she was doing, she might be able to use Harlan and the others as bargaining chips. She was halfway there when a shot rang out. The bullet kicked up dirt at her feet, bringing her to a halt. "That's far enough, lady," Eli Rollins called, his revolver aimed steadily at her. "Next one goes through you." Emma froze, her hand inching toward the hidden revolver in her pocket. "Don't even think about it," Eli warned, "hands where I can see them." Slowly, Emma raised her hands. Two of Eli's men approached, grabbing her roughly by the arms. They dragged her toward Eli, who was watching with cold amusement. "Spirited, ain't she?" one of the men commented, tightening his grip as Emma struggled. "That she is," Eli agreed. "But spirit only gets you so far out here." He stepped closer, studying her face. "Now, you're going to open that barn and release my brother, or I'm going to start shooting. Maybe I'll start with the old lady I saw watching from the window. Or maybe those kids I'm guessing you've got hidden somewhere." Emma's heart pounded with fear, but she forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "If you harm my children, I swear I'll—" "You'll what?" Eli laughed. "You're not exactly in a position to make threats, madam." Just then, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. Emma's heart soared with hope Gabriel had returned with help after all. But as she turned to look, her hope withered. It was only the outlaws who had managed to recapture 3 of their horses. "Got most of 'em, Eli," one called. "Rest ran clear to the horizon." "No matter," Eli replied. "We can double up." He turned his attention back to Emma. "Now, about that barn." Emma's mind raced. She was out of options, out of time. She had to protect her children, had to buy them time to escape. With a defeated slump of her shoulders, she nodded. "I'll open it. Just promise you won't hurt my family." Eli smiled, victory in his eyes. "You have my word as a gentleman." The words rang hollow, but Emma had no choice but to comply. Flanked by Eli and his men, she approached the barn. The heavy wooden bar that secured the door seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds as she lifted it away. "Harlan, you in there," Eli called. "Eli, that you?" came the reply from within. "Get us out of here, brother." Emma stepped back as the door swung open. Harlan Rollins emerged, squinting in the bright afternoon sunlight, his wounded shoulder crudely bandaged. Behind him, the other 2 members of his gang followed, looking worse for wear, but alive. "About time you showed up," Harlan growled at his brother. "This witch and that marshal nearly got us killed." Eli embraced his brother briefly. "Speaking of the marshal, we ran into him on the trail. Put a bullet in his horse. He won't be bothering us again." Emma's heart sank at the confirmation. Gabriel was injured, or worse. No help would be coming. Harlan turned his attention to Emma, malice gleaming in his eyes. "Now it's time to settle scores." "We don't have time for that," Eli cautioned. "The law could be on its way. We need to ride." "Not before I teach her a lesson," Harlan insisted. "Her and those brats of hers." Emma tensed, ready to make one final desperate attempt to protect her children. She'd die before letting these men near Sarah and James. The standoff was broken by a sound no one expected, a long, low whistle from the ridge to the east. All heads turned toward the sound. A lone figure sat atop a horse on the ridge, silhouetted against the afternoon sky. Even at this distance, Emma recognized the broad shoulders and the distinctive hat. Gabriel Turner was alive. "That's impossible," Eli muttered. "We shot his horse." "Looks like he found another," one of the gang members said nervously. As they watched, more figures appeared on the ridgeline. 1, 2, 5, 10 riders, all mounted, all armed. "It's a posse," Harlan hissed. "We're outnumbered." Eli's face darkened with rage. "Mount up. We'll make a run for the canyon. They won't follow us in there." In the confusion that followed, as the outlaws scrambled to share the remaining horses, Emma saw her chance. She broke free from her captors and ran toward the house. A shot rang out behind her, but she didn't slow. She burst through the door, slamming it shut behind her. "Mrs. Holloway, get the children. We have to go now." The elderly woman appeared from the back room, rifle still clutched in her hands. "What's happening?" "Marshal Turner is alive, and he's brought help, but we need to get away before—" The window shattered as a bullet tore through it. Emma ducked instinctively. "They're shooting at the house," Mrs. Holloway cried. Emma crawled to the trapdoor and flung it open. "Sarah, James, come quickly." The children emerged from the cellar, their faces pale with fear. "Mama, what's happening?" Sarah asked. "No time to explain. We need to leave, now." Emma grabbed James and lifted him into her arms while Sarah clung to her skirts. "Mrs. Holloway, can you make it to the creek?" The older woman nodded grimly. "I may be old, but I'm not dead yet." They hurried to the back door. Outside, the sound of gunfire had intensified. The posse was exchanging shots with the outlaws. Under cover of this distraction, Emma led her small group toward the creek that ran behind the property. If they could reach it, the deep-cut banks would provide cover all the way to the east pasture. They had almost made it when Emma heard the pounding of hooves behind them. She turned to see Harlan Rollins bearing down on them, his face twisted with hate. "Run!" Emma shouted, pushing Sarah ahead. "Take James and go with Mrs. Holloway." "But Mama—" "Go." As the children and Mrs. Holloway scrambled down the creek bank, Emma turned to face Harlan. She pulled Thomas's revolver from her pocket, raised it, and fired. The bullet went wide, striking Harlan's horse instead of him. The animal reared in pain, throwing its rider before bolting away. Harlan hit the ground hard but was on his feet again with surprising speed. He advanced on Emma, drawing his knife. "You've caused me nothing but trouble, woman," he snarled. "Time to end this." Emma backed away, raising the revolver again, but Harlan lunged before she could fire. She felt a searing pain as the knife sliced across her arm, causing her to drop the weapon. She stumbled backward, falling to the ground as Harlan loomed over her. "Your Marshal friend can't save you now," he taunted, raising the knife for a killing blow. The shot seemed to come from nowhere. Harlan staggered, a look of surprise crossing his features before he collapsed face first into the dirt beside Emma. Emma looked up to see Gabriel Turner approaching, revolver still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. His left arm was bandaged, and his face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but he was gloriously, wonderfully alive. "Are you all right?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "The children," Emma began, trying to rise. "They're safe," Gabriel assured her. "My men have them. It's over, Emma. The Rollins gang won't hurt anyone ever again." The reality of his words washed over her, and the tension that had been holding Emma together suddenly snapped. She began to shake uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. Gabriel holstered his weapon and gathered her gently in his arms. "It's all right," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe now. Your children are safe." Emma clung to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I thought they'd killed you," she whispered. "Takes more than the likes of them to finish me," Gabriel replied with a hint of a smile. "They did shoot my horse, though. Had to walk 5 miles before I found a ranch and could borrow a mount." ran into the sheriff and his posse on the way back. They were already on their way after getting word about the Rollins gang being spotted in the area. Emma pulled back slightly, looking up into his face. "You came back for us." Gabriel's blue eyes held hers steadily. "I gave my word, didn't I? Besides, I couldn't just leave you and the children to face those outlaws alone." Something passed between them in that moment. Something neither of them was ready to name, but both felt with startling clarity. The sound of approaching riders broke the spell. Emma hastily wiped away her tears as several men in deputies' badges rode up, leading Sarah, James, and Mrs. Holloway on a gentle mare. "Mama!" the children cried in unison, sliding from the horse to rush into her arms. Emma hugged them fiercely, checking them for injuries even as she whispered reassurances. "It's all right now. We're safe. The marshal saved us." James looked up at Gabriel with undisguised hero worship. "You got the bad men?" Gabriel nodded solemnly. "All of them. They won't bother you or your ma again." Sarah, always the more perceptive of the two, noticed the bloodstain on Gabriel's sleeve. "You're hurt." "It's just a scratch," Gabriel assured her. "Your ma got scratched too. Let's get you all back to the house and see to those wounds." The sheriff, a grizzled man named Morgan, approached as Gabriel helped Emma to her feet. "Quite a day you've had, Marshal. When you didn't return to town, we figured something might be amiss." "Good thing you did," Gabriel acknowledged. "Eli Rollins and his gang were more than I could handle alone." Sheriff Morgan surveyed the scene. The bodies of several outlaws lay where they had fallen, while deputies were securing the survivors. "Looks like we finally got the whole Rollins outfit. Judge Parker will be pleased." As they walked back toward the house, Emma leaning slightly on Gabriel's good arm, she was struck by how different everything looked. The home that had seemed so threatened, so vulnerable just hours before, now appeared as it truly was, a simple but sturdy cabin that had weathered many storms and would weather many more. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, so the children wouldn't hear. Gabriel looked down at her, understanding in his eyes. "The sheriff and his men will take the prisoners back to White Ridge. There'll be a trial, probably in Fort Smith. You and Mrs. Holloway might need to testify." "And you?" Emma couldn't quite bring herself to ask the question that really mattered. Would he be leaving now that his job was done? A shadow crossed Gabriel's face. "I've been tracking the Rollins gang for months, now that they're caught." He trailed off, seeming uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. "You'll be moving on," Emma finished for him, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "That's usually how it works," Gabriel agreed, but there was a hesitancy in his tone that gave Emma pause. They reached the house, which thankfully had suffered only minor damage from the gunfire. The sheriff's men were already clearing away the bodies and preparing to transport the prisoners. Mrs. Holloway had taken the children inside and was preparing tea with shaking hands. Gabriel led Emma to the porch, where he gently examined the cut on her arm. "Not too deep," he pronounced, "but it needs cleaning." Emma nodded, watching as he retrieved a medical kit from his saddlebags. His hands were gentle as he cleaned and bandaged her wound, a contrast to the deadly efficiency with which he'd wielded his weapon earlier. "You're good at that," she observed. "Learn a lot of skills in the army," Gabriel replied. "Not all of them involve shooting." When he'd finished with her arm, Emma insisted on tending to his wound in return. It was indeed just a graze, but it could have been much worse. "You could have been killed," she said softly as she wrapped a clean bandage around his arm. Gabriel's eyes met hers. "Occupational hazard. Is it worth it?" He considered the question seriously. "Most days, yes. Today, definitely. We got the Rollins gang and no innocent people were hurt. That's a good day's work in my book." Emma completed her bandaging and stepped back. "Thank you isn't enough, but it's all I have to offer." Gabriel shook his head. "You offered a lot more than thanks, Emma. You stood up to those men, protected your children. You showed more courage than most men I know." His praise warmed her, but the knowledge that he would soon be gone cast a shadow over the moment. Emma turned away, looking out over her land as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. "Will you stay for supper?" she asked, not looking at him. "The children would like that, I think." "I'd be honored," Gabriel replied. Supper that evening was a strange mix of celebration and subdued emotion. The sheriff and most of his men had departed with the prisoners, leaving only 2 deputies behind to help with the cleanup and to stand guard through the night. Mrs. Holloway, exhausted by the day's events, retired early to Emma's bed, while the children, excited by their adventure now that the danger was past, peppered Gabriel with questions about being a marshal. "Have you shot lots of bad men?" James asked, eyes wide with boyish fascination. "James," Emma admonished, "that's not an appropriate question." Gabriel smiled gently. "It's all right." He turned to the boy. "I try not to shoot anyone if I can help it, James. A marshal's job is to uphold the law, not to hurt people. Sometimes bad men don't give us a choice, but that's never something to be happy about." James considered this, his young face serious. "But today you had to." "Today I had to," Gabriel agreed solemnly. "To protect you and your sister and your ma." Sarah, who had been quietly watching the exchange, spoke up. "Will you have to leave tomorrow?" The question hung in the air, and Emma found she couldn't look at Gabriel as she awaited his answer. "I need to report to the federal marshal in Cheyenne," Gabriel said carefully. "Let him know we caught the Rollins gang." "But that's so far away," Sarah protested. "Can't you send a letter?" Gabriel chuckled. "It doesn't quite work that way, Miss Sarah." "Will you come back to visit?" James asked. Now Emma did look at Gabriel, unable to hide her own interest in his answer. Gabriel's blue eyes met hers across the table. "I'd like that, if your ma wouldn't mind." "I wouldn't mind," Emma said softly. Later, after the children were tucked in bed and the house had grown quiet, Emma and Gabriel sat once again on the porch. The night was cooler than the previous one, and Emma had brought a quilt to wrap around her shoulders. The stars seemed impossibly bright, a vast river of light flowing across the velvet darkness. "Will you really come back?" Emma asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. "Would you want me to?" "Yes," Emma answered simply. There seemed no point in pretense, not after all they had been through together. Gabriel shifted in his chair to face her. "Emma, I've been a lawman for a long time. I've never stayed in one place more than a year or two. It's the nature of the job always moving on, following the next criminal, the next case." "I understand," Emma said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "But," Gabriel continued, "I've been thinking lately that maybe it's time for a change." Emma's heart quickened. "What kind of change?" Gabriel looked out at the dark silhouette of the mountains. "I've saved some money over the years. Not a fortune, but enough to make a start somewhere. Buy some land, maybe some cattle." "You want to be a rancher?" Emma asked, surprised. "I was raised on a ranch," Gabriel reminded her. "It's in my blood, I suppose. Been thinking more and more about it lately. The trail gets lonely, and I'm not getting any younger." Emma hardly dared to hope what his words might imply. "There's good land available in these parts," she said carefully. "The Johnson place, about 5 miles west of here, has been empty since Old Man Johnson passed last winter." Gabriel nodded. "I saw it on my way in. Looks like good grazing land." "It is. And the house is solid. Thomas helped build it." They fell silent again, each contemplating possibilities neither had considered just days ago. "It wouldn't be easy," Emma said finally. "Ranching is hard work, especially starting out. I'm not afraid of hard work." And there would be talk. A single man setting up near a widow with 2 children. Gabriel turned to her fully then, his expression serious in the moonlight. Emma, I'm not a man who cares much for gossip, but I do care about proprieties. If I were to settle nearby, it would be with honorable intentions. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. Honorable intentions? I know we've only just met, Gabriel said, his voice low and earnest. And I'm not suggesting that is. I wouldn't presume to. He stopped, gathering his thoughts. What I mean to say is, I'd like the chance to court you properly. If you'd be amenable to that. Emma stared at him, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. This man, this brave, kind man who had saved her family and shown such gentleness with her children, wanted to court her? Gabriel, she began, then stopped, uncertain what to say. It had been so long since she'd thought of any man in that way. After Thomas died, she'd been too busy surviving, too focused on the children to consider her own heart. Yet in just 2 days, this Marshal had awakened feelings she'd thought long dormant. You don't need to answer now, Gabriel said quickly. It's sudden, I know that. Take some time to think about it. Emma shook her head. It's not that I need time to think. It's just unexpected. I never thought I'd feel this way again, after Thomas. And how do you feel? Gabriel asked softly. Instead of answering with words, Emma acted on impulse. She leaned across the space between their chairs and kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, but it conveyed more than words could express. When she pulled back, Gabriel's expression was one of wonder and quiet joy. I'll take that as a positive sign, he murmured. Emma smiled, feeling a lightness in her heart that had been absent for years. It is. But you're right. We should take things slowly. The children have been through so much change already. Gabriel nodded. I understand. I'll go to Cheyenne as planned, make my report. Then I'll return to look at the Johnson place. He took her hand in his. And to see you and the children again. We'll be waiting, Emma promised. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Gabriel prepared to leave with the 2 remaining deputies, who would escort him as far as White Ridge before returning to their duties. The children were subdued at breakfast, knowing their hero was departing. Do you really have to go? James asked, pushing his eggs around his plate. Afraid so, partner, Gabriel replied. But I won't be gone long, a couple of weeks at most. Sarah looked up, hope brightening her features. You're coming back? Gabriel glanced at Emma, who nodded slightly. Yes, I'm coming back. I'm thinking of buying some land nearby. Would that be all right with you two? The children's enthusiastic response brought smiles to both adults' faces. Even Mrs. Holloway, who had observed the growing connection between Emma and Gabriel with quiet approval, seemed pleased by the news. This territory could use more good men, she commented as Gabriel helped her into the wagon that would take her back to her own homestead. You take care of them while I'm gone, she added in a whisper, nodding toward Emma and the children. I intend to, madam, Gabriel assured her. The moment of departure came all too quickly. Gabriel's borrowed mount was saddled and ready, and the deputies were growing restless to be on their way. Emma walked with him to his horse, the children trailing behind. 2 weeks, Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. You'll be back in 2 weeks? Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Gabriel promised. He knelt down to the children's level. You two mind your mother while I'm gone, and keep practicing those knots I showed you, James. The boy nodded solemnly, chest puffed out with the importance of his assignment. Gabriel ruffled his hair, then turned to Sarah. And you, Miss Sarah, keep reading those books. A smart girl like you needs plenty of stories. Sarah smiled shyly. I will. And I'll help Mama with the chickens too. That's my girl. Gabriel straightened, turning finally to Emma. I'll send word when I know exactly when I'll return. Be careful, Emma said softly. The trail can be dangerous. Gabriel's eyes crinkled at the corners. Are you worried about me, Mrs. Baker? Perhaps a little, Emma admitted. I've grown rather fond of you, Marshal Turner. The feeling is mutual. Gabriel hesitated, then leaned down to kiss her cheek, a gesture both proper enough for the children's eyes and tender enough to convey his deeper feelings. Take care of yourself and these little ones. I'll be back before you know it. With that, he mounted his horse. Emma and the children stepped back, waving as Gabriel and the deputies rode away. They watched until the riders disappeared over the ridge, just as they had the day before. But this time, Emma's heart was full, not of fear, but of hope. Come on, children, she said, taking their hands. We have work to do. The garden needs weeding, and the chicken coop could use a fresh layer of straw. And we need to clean the house for when Marshal Turner comes back, Sarah added. Emma smiled down at her daughter. Yes, we do. It's important to have a proper home ready for visitors. Is Marshal Turner going to be more than a visitor, Mama? Sarah asked perceptively. Emma considered the question, thinking of Gabriel's honorable intentions and the promise of his return. Perhaps, Sarah. Would that be all right with you? Both children nodded vigorously, making Emma laugh. As they walked back to the house, she looked around at her land with new eyes. What had sometimes felt like an isolating burden, the ranch that Thomas had dreamed of but left her to manage alone now, seemed full of possibility again. The 2 weeks of Gabriel's absence passed both slower and faster than Emma expected. Slower in the quiet evenings when the children were asleep and she sat alone on the porch, looking at the stars and wondering where Gabriel was that night. Faster in the busy days of ranch work, as she threw herself into preparations for his return. She had the children help her give the cabin a thorough cleaning, washing the windows until they sparkled and scrubbing the plank floors until the wood gleamed. She baked bread and churned butter, putting up preserves from the early summer berries and tending the vegetable garden with extra care. You're singing again, Mama, Sarah observed one morning as Emma kneaded dough in the kitchen. Emma paused, realizing her daughter was right. She had been humming, then softly singing an old folk song that Thomas used to love. When had she last sung anything? She couldn't remember. I suppose I am, she acknowledged. Does it bother you? Sarah shook her head, smiling. No, I like it. You used to sing all the time, before Pa died. The simple observation touched Emma's heart. Well, I'll try to do it more often. True to his word, Gabriel sent a letter after a week, carried by a passing freight wagon. His neat, precise handwriting informed her that his business in Cheyenne was concluded, and he had been granted a leave of absence to consider his future prospects. He would be returning in another week, and yes, he was very interested in the Johnson property. Emma read the letter until she had memorized every word, then carefully folded it and tucked it into her Bible for safekeeping. Only 7 more days until Gabriel's return. On the morning of his expected arrival, Emma was up before dawn. She bathed in the creek, using her precious store-bought soap that she normally saved for special occasions. She put on her best dress, a deep blue calico that Thomas had always said brought out the color of her eyes, and twisted her hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. The children, sensing the importance of the day, were on their best behavior, completing their chores without complaint, and then donning their Sunday clothes without being asked. Do I look handsome, Mama? James asked, standing proudly in his clean shirt and suspenders. Very handsome, Emma assured him, smoothing his cowlick with a damp hand. Marshal Turner will be most impressed. Do you think he'll like my new ribbon? Sarah touched the pale blue ribbon Emma had fashioned from scraps of an old dress. He'd be a fool not to, Emma replied, adjusting the bow. You look beautiful, my darling. They spent the morning preparing a special dinner, a roast chicken with dumplings, fresh vegetables from the garden, and an apple pie for dessert. The delicious smells filled the cabin as they worked, and Emma found herself checking the window every few minutes for any sign of an approaching rider. It was early afternoon when James, who had stationed himself as lookout on the porch, came running inside. "Mama, rider's coming, and there's a wagon too." Emma's heart leapt. She hadn't expected Gabriel to bring a wagon. Perhaps he had already decided to stay? She smoothed her skirt and checked her reflection in the small mirror by the door, then followed James outside. 3 riders were approaching, with a loaded wagon bringing up the rear. As they drew closer, Emma recognized Gabriel in the lead. Sitting tall in the saddle of a handsome black gelding, clearly a new purchase. The other 2 men were strangers to her, likely hired hands to help with the wagon. Emma and the children stood on the porch, watching as the small procession approached. Gabriel's face broke into a wide smile when he saw them waiting, and he urged his horse forward, pulling ahead of the others. "You came back," Emma said as he reined in before the porch. Gabriel dismounted in one fluid motion. "I promised I would." His eyes took in her appearance, lingering appreciatively. "You look lovely, Emma." Emma felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but before she could respond, the children rushed forward to greet him. "Marshal Turner, did you bring us anything from the city?" James asked eagerly. "James," Emma scolded. "That's not polite." Gabriel laughed. "As a matter of fact, I did bring something." He reached into his saddlebag and produced 2 small packages. "This one's for you, James, and this is for Miss Sarah." The children accepted the gifts with wide eyes. James unwrapped his to find a small wooden horse, expertly carved and painted. Sarah's package contained a porcelain doll with real hair and a tiny calico dress. "She's beautiful," Sarah breathed, cradling the doll carefully. "Thank you, sir," James exclaimed, already galloping his horse through the air. "You're welcome," Gabriel replied, clearly pleased by their reactions. He turned back to Emma. "I brought something for you too, but it can wait until later." The 2 men with the wagon had caught up by now, and Gabriel introduced them as brothers he'd hired in White Ridge to help transport his purchases. "I've been busy," he explained to Emma. "Went to look at the Johnson place the day I got back. Old man Johnson's son was eager to sell heading back east, he said. We struck a deal right there." Emma's eyes widened. "You bought it already?" Gabriel nodded. "Got a good price, too. The house needs some work, but the land is everything I hoped for. Good grass, plenty of water." He gestured to the wagon. "Bought some basic supplies to get started, and some cattle they're being driven over tomorrow by another hand I hired." Emma was stunned by the speed of it all. "You've certainly been efficient." "When I set my mind to something, I don't waste time," Gabriel said, his eyes holding hers with a meaning that went beyond ranch purchases. The hired men unloaded the wagon, depositing Gabriel's personal belongings on the porch: a trunk, a saddle, several crates of supplies. Then, after sharing a meal with them, the men departed to deliver the rest of the goods to Gabriel's new property. "You'll stay for dinner?" Emma asked Gabriel once they were alone. "I've prepared something special." "I'd be honored," Gabriel replied. "But first, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. Perhaps we could talk while the children play with their new toys?" Emma nodded, curious and a little nervous. "Children, why don't you show Mrs. Holloway your gifts? She's been asking about Marshal Turner's return." The elderly woman had indeed been a frequent visitor during Gabriel's absence, her curiosity about the developing relationship barely disguised as neighborly concern. The children ran eagerly to her small cabin down the creek, leaving Emma and Gabriel alone. "Shall we sit on the porch?" Emma suggested. Gabriel shook his head. "Actually, I was hoping we might take a short ride. There's something I'd like to show you." Intrigued, Emma agreed. Gabriel helped her onto his new gelding, then mounted behind her. The closeness was both thrilling and slightly scandalous. Emma was glad Mrs. Holloway couldn't see them. Gabriel's arms encircled her as he took the reins, his chest a solid warmth against her back. They rode west, toward the Johnson property. The afternoon sun warmed their shoulders, and a light breeze carried the scent of summer grasses. Emma found herself relaxing into Gabriel's embrace, the rhythm of the horse's gait and the security of his arms creating a cocoon of contentment. "I missed you," Gabriel said quietly, his mouth close to her ear. "Thought about you every day." "We missed you too," Emma replied. "The children kept asking when you'd return." "Just the children?" There was a smile in his voice. Emma laughed softly. "Perhaps their mother wondered as well." They crested a small hill, and the Johnson ranch came into view. It was smaller than Emma's property, but well situated, with a creek running through it and rolling pastures ideal for grazing. The house was a simple two-story structure, weathered but solid. Gabriel reined in the horse, allowing Emma to survey what would be his new home. "What do you think?" he asked. "Will it do?" "It's lovely," Emma said honestly. "The house is bigger than mine, and the land is good. Thomas always said Johnson knew how to pick property." Gabriel nodded. "Your husband was right. It's perfect for what I have in mind." "And what is that exactly?" Emma asked. "Cattle ranching?" "Partly," Gabriel agreed, "but I have bigger plans." He urged the horse forward down toward the house. When they reached the yard, he dismounted, then lifted Emma down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Emma felt a flutter of awareness at his touch. "Come, let me show you," he said, taking her hand. He led her to the house, opening the door with a key he produced from his pocket. Inside, the main room was dusty and empty, save for some basic furniture left behind by the previous owners. But Gabriel didn't linger there. He led her through to the back, where a new door had been installed in what had once been a solid wall. "This is the first change I've made," he explained, opening the door to reveal a small room that had clearly once been a storage area, but was now in the process of being converted. Fresh lumber lay stacked in one corner, and tools were neatly arranged on a makeshift workbench. "What will this be?" Emma asked, puzzled by his enthusiasm for what seemed like a minor renovation. Gabriel's eyes lit up. "A workshop. For this." He crossed to the workbench and picked up what Emma had initially taken for scrap wood. As he held it up, she realized it was a partially carved horse, similar to the toy he'd given James, but larger and more detailed. "You made James's toy?" she asked, surprised. Gabriel nodded. "Carving is something I've done since I was a boy. My pa taught me. Over the years, it's been a way to pass time on the trail, something to do in the quiet evenings." He placed the unfinished horse back on the bench. "I've always thought that someday, when I settled down, I might try my hand at making them to sell. Toys, furniture, whatever people need." Emma studied the carving, impressed by the skill evident even in the unfinished piece. "You're very talented." "Thank you," Gabriel said simply. "It brings me peace, working with my hands this way. After years of carrying a gun, I'm looking forward to creating things instead of—" He trailed off, but Emma understood what he didn't say. "It's a wonderful plan," she assured him. "You could sell your pieces in White Ridge, maybe even ship some to Cheyenne or Denver." Gabriel smiled, pleased by her enthusiasm. "That's what I was thinking. Between that and the cattle, it should make for a good living." He hesitated, then added, "A good living for a family." The implication hung in the air between them. Emma felt her pulse quicken. "Gabriel." He took her hands in his. "Emma, I know it's soon. We've known each other barely 3 weeks. But in that time, I've come to care for you and your children more than I thought possible." His blue eyes were earnest as they held hers. "I'm not asking for an answer today. I just want you to know my intentions. I bought this place because it's close to yours, because I want to be near you, to have the chance to court you properly." Emma was deeply moved by his words. In the years since Thomas's death, She had resigned herself to raising her children alone. The idea of finding love again had seemed like a distant, impossible dream. Yet here stood a good man, a brave man who had saved her family and now offered his heart. "I care for you too," she admitted softly. "More than I expected to. The children adore you. And I—" She took a deep breath. "I've been happier these past weeks, even with you away, than I've been in a very long time." Gabriel's face brightened with hope. "Then you'll allow me to court you?" In answer, Emma reached up and touched his cheek. "Yes." Gabriel's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, but Emma had no desire to retreat. Their lips met in a kiss that started gently but quickly deepened as weeks of growing feeling found expression. Gabriel's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and Emma wound her arms around his neck, surrendering to the warmth and rightness of his embrace. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Gabriel rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "I've been wanting to do that since I rode away 2 weeks ago," he confessed. "I've been wanting you to," Emma replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Gabriel laughed, the sound warm and rich. "Mrs. Baker, I do believe you're going to keep me on my toes." Emma smiled up at him. "I certainly intend to try, Marshal Turner." They spent another hour at the Johnson now Turner Ranch, with Gabriel showing Emma his plans for the property. He'd already hired men to repair the roof and replace some damaged floorboards. The barn needed work too, but it was sound enough to house the cattle he'd purchased. 20 head to start, with plans to expand as finances allowed. As the afternoon waned, they rode back to Emma's ranch, where Mrs. Holloway had taken it upon herself to supervise the children in setting the table for dinner. The elderly woman gave Emma a knowing look when they returned, no doubt noticing their slightly rumpled appearance and the glow in their cheeks. But she said nothing beyond a murmured, "About time." Dinner was a joyous affair. The children, delighted to have Gabriel back, chattered excitedly about everything that had happened in his absence. Gabriel listened attentively, asking questions and responding with genuine interest to even the most mundane details of their lives. And then the hen pecked James right on the nose. Sarah concluded one tale, giggling at her brother's misfortune. "It wasn't funny," James protested. "It hurt." "I'm sure it did," Gabriel sympathized. "Chickens can be surprisingly fierce when they've a mind to be." "Have you ever been pecked by a chicken, Marshal Turner?" James asked. "Indeed I have. And worse, once I was chased clear across a barnyard by an angry goose." This revelation delighted the children, who demanded the full story. Gabriel obliged, describing his youthful encounter with the belligerent bird in such comical terms that even Emma found herself laughing until tears came to her eyes. Mrs. Holloway departed after dinner, claiming fatigue, though Emma suspected she wanted to give the reunited couple some privacy. The children, however, were too excited by Gabriel's return to consider bed, despite the lateness of the hour. "Just one more game of checkers, Mama, please?" begged James. "Marshal Turner promised to teach me a new strategy." Emma exchanged an amused glance with Gabriel. "One game," she conceded, "then straight to bed." While Gabriel and James set up the checkerboard, Sarah tugged at Emma's skirt. "Mama, is Marshal Turner going to marry you?" she whispered. Emma nearly dropped the plate she was washing. "Sarah, where did you get such an idea?" The little girl shrugged. "Mrs. Holloway told Mr. Peterson at church that it was just a matter of time before you two got hitched." "Is it true?" Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. Mrs. Holloway shouldn't be gossiping about such things, and neither should you, young lady. "But would it be so bad?" Sarah persisted. "I like him, and he makes you smile again." Emma softened, touched by her daughter's perception. "It's not that simple, Sarah. These things take time." "How much time?" "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll have to wait and see. Sarah seemed to accept this answer, at least temporarily. She joined the boys at the checkerboard, watching their game with solemn attention. Emma returned to her dishes, her mind whirling with her daughter's questions and her own tumultuous feelings. Was it too soon to be thinking of marriage? Perhaps. Yet there was no denying the connection between her and Gabriel, a bond that had formed in the crucible of danger and grown stronger in the weeks since. She was not a woman given to flights of fancy or rash decisions. Neither, she suspected, was Gabriel a man who acted without careful thought. If they were both feeling this pull toward each other, perhaps it was worth heeding. The checkers game concluded with James's defeat, though the boy took it in good spirits, buoyed by Gabriel's praise for his improving skills. Emma ushered the children off to bed, listening to their prayers and tucking them in with an extra kiss for each. "Will Marshal Turner be here in the morning?" James asked sleepily. "I expect so," Emma replied. "He's staying in White Ridge for now, but he'll be back to work on his ranch." "Good," the boy murmured, already drifting toward sleep. "Someday I'm gonna be just like him." Emma stroked his hair. "I think that would make him very proud." When she returned to the main room, Gabriel was standing by the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. He turned at her approach, and the warmth in his eyes made her heart skip. "They're asleep?" he asked. Emma nodded. "It won't last. They'll be up at dawn, eager to see if you've returned." "Then I should probably say goodnight," Gabriel said, though he made no move toward the door. "It's a ride back to town." "You could stay," Emma offered impulsively. "We have the spare room where Mrs. Holloway sleeps when she visits." Gabriel seemed tempted but shook his head. "Better not. People talk, and I won't have your reputation sullied." Emma appreciated his concern for propriety, even as a part of her wished he would stay. "When will you move into your new house?" "As soon as the roof repairs are finished. Another day or two, I'm told." Gabriel took a step closer to her. "I brought something for you, remember?" "You didn't need to bring me a gift," Emma protested. "It's nothing elaborate," Gabriel assured her. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box, beautifully carved with a pattern of wildflowers. "Made this while I was away. Thought you might like something to keep your special things in." Emma accepted the box, running her fingers over the intricate design. "It's beautiful," she said softly. She opened it to find a velvet lining inside, clearly added with great care. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Gabriel's voice had dropped to a near whisper. He was standing very close now, close enough that Emma could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I should put it somewhere safe," she said, not moving. "Yes, you should." Gabriel's gaze dropped to her lips. Neither of them was sure who moved first, but suddenly they were in each other's arms again, the wooden box clutched in Emma's hand as their lips met in a kiss that spoke of longing and promise. Gabriel's arms tightened around her, lifting her slightly off her feet as he deepened the kiss. Emma responded with equal fervor, weeks of anticipation crystallizing in this perfect moment. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. Gabriel pressed his forehead to hers, his voice husky. "I really should go." "I know," Emma whispered, though every fiber of her being protested the idea. With visible reluctance, Gabriel released her and stepped back. "I'll return tomorrow. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Something important." Emma's pulse quickened. "I'll be here." Gabriel retrieved his hat from the peg by the door. "Good night, Emma." "Good night, Gabriel." She watched from the door as he mounted his horse and rode away, staying until his figure was swallowed by the darkness. Only then did she close the door, press the wooden box to her heart, and allow herself to dream of what tomorrow might bring. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Emma was up early, unable to sleep, as anticipation for Gabriel's return coursed through her veins. The children, as predicted, were equally eager for the day to begin, chattering about the Marshal over breakfast. "Do you think he'll take me riding on his new horse?" James asked, wolfing down his porridge. "Only if you ask politely," Emma replied. "And finish your chores first." "I'm going to show him how well I can read now," Sarah declared. "I've been practicing extra hard." Emma smiled at their enthusiasm. "I'm sure Marshal Turner will be very impressed with both of you. Now eat up, we have work to do before he arrives." The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Emma and the children tackled their usual chores with unusual vigor, motivated by the prospect of Gabriel's visit. By mid-morning, the house was spotless, the chickens fed, and the garden weeded. Emma had just put a fresh loaf of bread in the oven when the sound of approaching hooves drew them all to the window. "He's here!" James exclaimed, racing for the door. "James, wait!" Emma called, but the boy was already outside, with Sarah close on his heels. Emma smoothed her hair and straightened her apron before following them out. Gabriel was dismounting, grinning as the children danced around him with their excited greetings. He looked handsome in the morning light, his brown hair gleaming with copper highlights, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "Good morning," Emma called from the porch. Gabriel looked up, his smile widening. "Good morning, Emma. Hope I'm not too early." "Not at all. We've been up for hours." Emma descended the steps to join them, conscious of the children's curious gazes flicking between her and Gabriel. "Would you like some coffee? I've just put fresh bread in the oven." "That sounds wonderful," Gabriel accepted. "But first, I wonder if I might have a word with you? Privately?" Emma's heart fluttered. "Of course." She turned to the children. "Sarah, take your brother inside and check on the bread, please. Make sure it doesn't burn." Sarah gave her mother a knowing look that seemed far too mature for her 10 years, but she obediently herded her brother toward the house. "Come on, James. I'll let you lick the honey spoon if you come now." Once the children were inside, Gabriel took Emma's hand and led her toward the shade of the large oak tree that stood near the corral. "I couldn't sleep last night," he confessed. "Kept thinking about what I wanted to say to you today." "And what is that?" Emma asked, though she hoped she knew. Gabriel took both her hands in his expression serious. "Emma Baker, I know this may seem sudden to others, but I've lived enough to know my own mind and heart. From the moment I stepped into your home and saw you standing there, protecting your children with nothing but courage and a small revolver, I knew you were extraordinary." Emma's breath caught in her throat as Gabriel continued. "These past weeks, getting to know you and Sarah and James, have been the happiest I can remember. You've shown me what I've been missing all these years on the trail of home. A family, love." He squeezed her hands gently. "I don't want to miss it any longer." To Emma's surprise, Gabriel dropped to one knee before her. "I'm not a wealthy man, and I can't offer you a life of luxury. But I can offer you my heart, my hands, and my solemn promise to cherish you and your children for as long as I live." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "Emma Baker, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Emma's eyes as Gabriel emptied the pouch into his palm, revealing a simple gold band set with a small, sparkling diamond. It wasn't an elaborate ring, but to Emma it was the most beautiful piece of jewelry she'd ever seen. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "are you certain? It's been such a short time." "I've never been more certain of anything," Gabriel replied, his blue eyes steady on hers. "I love you, Emma. I love your children. I want to build a life with you, if you'll have me." Emma's heart soared. In that moment, any doubts she'd harbored vanished like morning mist in the summer sun. "Yes," she said, a radiant smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." Gabriel's face lit with joy. He slid the ring onto her finger, then rose to his feet and gathered her into his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a pledge of the future they would build together. They were so absorbed in each other that neither noticed the small faces pressed against the window of the house, watching with gleeful smiles. It wasn't until James burst out the door, unable to contain himself any longer, that they broke apart. "Are you going to be our new pa?" the boy demanded, running toward them with Sarah close behind. Gabriel looked to Emma, who nodded encouragingly. He knelt down to the children's level. "If you'll have me," he said seriously. "I've asked your mother to marry me, and she said yes. But it's important to me that you're happy about it too." James didn't hesitate. "Yes!" he shouted, throwing himself at Gabriel with such force that the man nearly toppled backward. "I always wanted a pa who could shoot like you." "James!" Emma admonished, though she couldn't help laughing. Sarah approached more cautiously. "Will we still live here?" she asked. "Or at your new house?" "That's something we'll need to discuss as a family," Gabriel replied, one arm around James while he extended the other to Sarah. "There are many decisions to make, but whatever we decide, we'll be together. That's what matters most." Sarah considered this, then nodded solemnly. "I think I would like having you for a father," she decided. "You make Mama happy. And you tell good stories." Gabriel smiled. "High praise indeed. Thank you, Miss Sarah." The four of them stood together beneath the oak tree, the morning sun warming their faces as they began to plan their future. There would be details to sort out, arrangements to make. Emma's ranch and Gabriel's new property were close enough that they could potentially maintain both. Perhaps they would live primarily at one and use the other for the expanding cattle business. Maybe Gabriel could convert one of the houses into a workshop for his wood carving. But those were decisions for another day. For now, it was enough to stand in the circle of Gabriel's arm, watching as he answered the children's excited questions with patience and humor. Emma touched the ring on her finger, still hardly able to believe this turn her life had taken. 3 weeks ago, she had been a widow struggling to keep her ranch afloat and her children fed. Now she was engaged to a man who had saved not just her family's lives, but her heart as well. A man who looked at her with love in his eyes and spoke of a future filled with promise. "What are you thinking?" Gabriel asked softly, catching her pensive expression. Emma smiled up at him. "I'm thinking about how quickly life can change, how a moment of terrible danger brought you to us, and how grateful I am for that, despite the fear." Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes the darkest storms bring the greatest blessings." "That they do," Emma agreed, leaning against his solid warmth as Sarah and James danced around them, already planning where Gabriel's things would go in their home. "That they most certainly do." As the summer days stretched into fall, Emma and Gabriel's plans took shape. They decided to make Emma's ranch their primary home, as the children were settled there and the house, though smaller, held cherished memories of Thomas that Emma wasn't ready to leave behind. Gabriel's property would serve as the center of their expanding cattle operation, and he converted one of the outbuildings into the workshop he'd dreamed of. Their wedding was a simple affair, held in the small church in White Ridge. Emma wore a new dress of pale blue silk, a luxury she'd never allowed herself before, but which Gabriel insisted upon ordering from Denver. The children stood beside them as they spoke their vows, and Mrs. Holloway wept unashamedly in the front pew. Even Sheriff Morgan made an appearance, his weather-beaten face creased in a rare smile as he congratulated the marshal who had brought down the notorious Rollins gang. The transition from lawman to rancher wasn't always smooth for Gabriel. There were nights when Emma would find him on the porch, staring at the stars with a restless energy that spoke of his years on the trail. But as the months passed, that restlessness gradually subsided, replaced by a deep contentment that Emma recognized in herself as well. Gabriel proved to be a natural father, patient with James's boundless energy and thoughtful with Sarah's quieter, more contemplative nature. He taught them both to ride properly, to track game, and to respect the wild beauty of the land they called home. In the evenings, he would carve while Emma sewed, the children playing or reading nearby in a domestic tableau that sometimes brought tears to Emma's eyes with its simple perfection. His woodworking business flourished beyond their expectations. Gabriel's carvings toys, furniture, decorative items found eager buyers not just in White Ridge, but in Cheyenne and beyond. A merchant from Denver passing through on business was so impressed with Gabriel's work that he placed a standing order for regular shipments to his store. The cattle operation prospered as well. By their first anniversary, the herd had doubled in size, and they hired 2 full-time hands to help manage it. The income from both ventures allowed them to make improvements to the ranch that Emma had only dreamed of: a larger chicken coop, a proper smokehouse, and most precious of all, an addition to the cabin that gave them a proper bedroom and the children each a space of their own. On a crisp October morning, just over a year after Gabriel had ridden into their lives, Emma stood on the porch watching her husband and children. Gabriel was showing James how to mend a saddle, their heads bent together over the leather workbench he'd built. Sarah sat nearby, reading aloud from her lesson book, occasionally glancing up to ask Gabriel a question about a difficult word. The scene filled Emma's heart to bursting. She placed a hand on her stomach, still flat, but harboring a secret she'd confirmed with the doctor in White Ridge just yesterday. A new life. A symbol of the love she and Gabriel had found in each other. She hadn't told him yet she was waiting for the perfect moment. As if sensing her gaze, Gabriel looked up and smiled, the same smile that still made her heart flutter. He said something to the children, then crossed the yard to join her on the porch. "Everything all right?" he asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "You've been quiet this morning." Emma nodded, leaning into his embrace as his arms encircled her waist. "Just counting my blessings." Gabriel pressed a kiss to her temple. "And are there many?" "More than I can count," Emma replied. She turned in his arms to face him, her eyes shining. "And one more on the way, about 6 months from now." Gabriel's expression shifted from confusion to wonder as her meaning sank in. "Emma, are you saying—" "Yes," she confirmed, laughing at the joy that spread across his face. "We're going to have a baby." With a whoop that startled the chickens in the yard, Gabriel lifted her off her feet and spun her in a circle. "A baby! Our baby!" Emma clung to his shoulders, laughing through happy tears. "Put me down, you'll make me dizzy." Gabriel complied but kept his arms around her, his face alight with joy. "When did you find out?" "Yesterday, in town. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Emma touched his cheek. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Gabriel replied, his voice thick with emotion. He placed a gentle hand on her stomach. "A child of our own. Sarah and James's little brother or sister." The children, drawn by Gabriel's shout, came running to investigate. When told the news, their reactions were predictably different. James loudly insisted on a brother, while Sarah asked thoughtful questions about when the baby would arrive and where it would sleep. As the family gathered on the porch, making plans and suggesting names, Emma felt a sense of completion unlike anything she'd known before. The path that had led here had not been easy. She had known loss, hardship, and fear. But she had also found strength she didn't know she possessed, and ultimately, a love that had healed her wounded heart. Gabriel caught her eye over the children's excited chatter, his gaze conveying all that words could not: gratitude, love, and the promise of a future brighter than either of them could have imagined when he first rode to her rescue on that fateful day. Emma's thoughts drifted to the moment in the midst of danger when she had kissed him impulsively, whispering a promise of home if he would save her children. Little had she known then how completely that promise would be fulfilled, not just a home of safety and shelter, but one of love, family, and new beginnings. Gabriel's arm tightened around her shoulders, drawing her close against the autumn chill. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Turner?" Emma smiled up at the man who had changed her world. "I was just thinking that some promises are even more wonderful when kept than when they're made." Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And this is just the beginning." As their lips met in a tender kiss, the children's laughter ringing in their ears and the future bright before them, Emma knew with absolute certainty that he was right. This was indeed just the beginning of their story, a story of love found in the most unexpected of circumstances, of a family forged in courage and strengthened by devotion, of a home built not just of timber and nails but of hopes and dreams and promises kept. And in the vast wild beauty of the Wyoming territory, as the seasons turned and life continued its eternal cycle of renewal, there could be no finer ending or beginning than that.